Well, welcome everyone to the first of our afternoon sessions here at the conference today. And we have our keynote speaker, Margaret Moore. Across the globe, Margaret Moore is a thought leading, pioneering tour de force in coaching. Margaret, aka Coach Meg, is an executive coach, co-founder and chair of the Institute of Coaching at McLean and a Harvard Medical School affiliate. She's also the founder of Well Coaches Corporation, a coaching school for health professionals, and she is a prolific writer and author. Margaret also co-founded the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching in the United States and is working very hard towards healthcare reimbursement of coaching services in the US. We are very honoured and very fortunate to have Coach Meg with us today. Quick reminder about questions. We'll take questions at the end of this session. The chat will be open for questions only. So to help us get to as many questions as possible, we ask you not to use the chat for general comments or conversations. So just put your questions into the chat and I will feed in as many as possible for Margaret's response. If you have a burning question which couldn't be answered during the session, please feel free to email info@ukhealthcoaches.com and I will pass questions forward for your responses. So without further ado, welcome Margaret Moore, Coach Meg.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Isabella. And hello, everyone. I wish we were in the same room and feeling there's nothing like a large room full of lots of coaches. The energy bounces. It can almost take the ceiling off. And so, and let's just really feel that energy together here, even though it's not quite the same. Isabella, you were saying that you're all chuffed. And I am too. I lived in the UK for some key 6 years of my early work life. And it's just such a treat to be with all of you today. So my topic, which honestly is enough to fill a master's degree in a year, but it's about the fact that coaching and well-being are one and the same, that they're two peas in the pod. That we are models of well-being. The coaching model is in itself a well-being intervention, and we are aligned with what is a very diverse, heterogeneous kind of world around well-being. And I want to go through, it's a pretty quick tour today of the way I think about well-being and coaching and the well-being models, but mainly what I want to convey is just how we live and breathe well-being as coaches, and that it really is our calling to be a force for human well-being. So there's a lot of different words in the dictionary that relate to well-being, and we'll touch on a few of those. This picture is of me before I started in the coaching industry, when I was just leaving my biotechnology career, and I'm in Nepal. I'm doing a handstand we're at about 13,000 foot altitude in the Annapurna region of Nepal. And I can't do headstands anymore because they caused glaucoma. but this is my memory. And behind me, from the top of the mountain behind me to the bottom, is some 17,000 foot drop. Just the awe of nature that is so amazing. And so this is a peak experience for me, and it reminds me of what peak experiences are all about, which is something that Maslow brought to us. So the word thriving I like in particular because I'm a biologist by background, not a psychologist. And in biology, living things all have their own formula for thriving. You know, a flower needs sunshine, nutrients in the soil, water, and wind for pollination. All of those ingredients enable thriving. And that's not so different for humans, except of course we're each unique in our own formulas. So there is a formula for each of us to thrive in any given moment. And that's what we want to help people find. The WHO describes thriving as optimal physical and mental health. And that doesn't mean you have no disease or adversity in your life. You can be thriving while dealing with, just think about today with this horrific tragedy, the war in Ukraine, we're all every day, horrified by that. And yet we're still called to do our best to thrive as humans. So I'm going to very quickly go through, kind of the main models around well-being, and just again to ground us in the diversity and realize, just how much there is to be on top of. And I think it's important to say there is no unified theory for human well-being, and that means that for coaches we are drawing from, a rich toolbox all the time, and there's no one domain that really sits on top of the others. Maybe in our lifetimes that will evolve. I think humanity at the end is really all about all of human well-being, and maybe that will become our theory. But just for now, there's a lot of bits and pieces to get on top of. So in the Well Coaches Coaching Psychology Manual that my team at Well Coaches built for the first 8 years from 2000 to 2008, we developed iteratively with the science what we call our vision coaching tool. And very simply, it focuses first on positive psychology. What is going well? What makes you thrive? What energizes you? What puts wind in your sails? So that's the positive resources that then give you the resource to move towards the future you want. So your vision and visioning your best self is a well-being tool, and then understanding why that's important, intrinsic and autonomous motivation, which is critical for well-being. And then, of course, self-efficacy, which means being appreciative and aware of what our challenges are, and feeling creative and resourceful through our strengths and our ability to brainstorm and come up with strategies and be creative to get around our challenges, which then further builds self-efficacy. And then the experimental process of change, especially when change is hard, where you don't want to put your self-esteem online with big goals. You want to basically evolve and awaken towards your own formula. So that's in a nutshell. And the whole book is full of connections between science around well-being and coaching tools, which I won't go into today, but just want to make sure that that's our reference. So then I want to start in terms of the well-being literature with psychological needs, and then go from there. And that's because if you had to pick one theory as a backbone to coaching, it's got to be self-determination theory. And this has replaced Maslow's hierarchy as an empirical, an incredibly rigorously developed theory over 3 or 4 decades by Rich Ryan and Ed Deci. And it has 6 mini theories, and one has to do with core psychological needs. The primary one being autonomy, which is being attuned to your own desires, your values, and what's right and wrong, and living by that. And then, and from that comes the motivation, the light force to then become competent and grow one's competence. So key force in human well-being. And ideally, those things to both happen through relationships that support autonomy to build competence. And that's what leads to enhanced well-being and performance and everything else. So that's kind of coaching in a nutshell. And I like to say that when you become a coach, you make a big transformational shift from serving your own needs. Okay, so that means judging by your own values and standards and preferences and interests, wanting to fix people through sharing your own competence and expertise, or exerting your own ability to help. So you rescue people, right? You give them the answers, you give them the prescription, you give them your ideas. And what happens when we become coaches, we all go through this. We often still to this day, we regress back to serving our own core needs. But when we become a coach, we become awake, mindful, meta-aware to the fact that we're serving another person's autonomy, their own motivation. We're helping them grow their competence through the relationship that supports that. So we get out of our own needs and we serve others. And that is a transformational shift. My apologies, I've got a jumpy mouse. That's the transformational shift that we make as coaches. And that is a powerful shift that, in fact, if all humans knew how to do this, we would be a better world. I mean, it would be unthinkable to invade Ukraine if you really understood the basics of human well-being, which are now fully alive around the world. Okay, so then Maslow's work has been brought back to life and connected to the latest science by the wonderful work of Scott Barry Kaufman in his new book called Transcendent. And he's got, you've probably seen the sailboat metaphor. It comes in the well-being space from a number of angles, but basically what he's saying is that the base of the hull of our boats, if you think about us as sailboats sailing around the sea, is the foundation of security. And so that's feeling value, self-esteem, feeling connected and belonging, and feeling safe. And when you have clients who are who have inadequate social resources, in the US, we call that social determinants of health, income, education, dealing with bias and racism, dealing with just the fundamental inequities in our society. When you don't have those things, you're not stable. And without stability, you can't move into growth. And so we have a role as coaches in these underserved populations. The coaching intervention in itself helps validate people's worth, provides a sense of caring and belonging and psychological safety to be who you are with your vulnerability. So we play, it's not therapy, but the natural expression of coaching is in fact providing stability and security. And then once that base is built, just like with children, once they feel safe, they go out and explore. The same thing with humans. When we feel safe, and if you bring in self-determination theory, we have autonomy, then we naturally are curious. We naturally want to explore. We naturally fall in love with life and others, and we find our purpose. And so that's another way of thinking about psychological needs and how coaching directly addresses them. And then it's a long story and it goes back a decade, but I, through deep training internal family systems practice, I found in my own internal world, not just these 3 core needs, but 9 personality parts that all have voices that in fact operate, if you go into it deeply, like subpersonalities. And I think that even though the core needs, self-determination theory probably are uber alles, they're the most important, there are others. And I think this model, which is my own work, which I've been building on ever since, is a larger frame of psychological needs and strengths and values. And this is a map of the 9 parts, and they're color-coded by Carl Jung's types. So the reds are the feelers, introverted and extroverted. The greens are the sensors, introverted and extroverted. The blues are the thinkers, introverted and extroverted. And the intuitives, introverted and extroverted. And then confidence doesn't fit into Jung's model, it fits into Enneagram. And then the core self is, whatever the soul, whatever who we are without our human parts, which is sort of the orchestrator of all of this. So that's another model of core needs. And all of these activities of the human mind are put to work in a coaching session. So we are drawing out the fullness, and all of us in our personality structures have several parts that are dominant. There are identity, there are egos, but they're not all of us. And so as a coach, we're helping people become more whole and build out more of themselves. If you know social cognitive theory, Al Bandura talked about the physiological and affective responses in confidence. And this is really all these other parts speaking to us. These are the other parts of us that have an agenda around change and maybe not being on board. Okay, so then let's shift to positive psychology. So Ed Diener's subjective well-being model, Ed sadly died last year. We've lost a few. In fact, Albert Bender has also died in the last year. And he really brought to fore life satisfaction, positive affect, and negative affect as the three core drivers of well-being. And a paper a research study that his group did at Gallup, which I wrote a research translation on for the Institute of Coaching, showed with 2 million data points that when people are satisfied with their lives, have sufficient positive affect, and manage their negative affect, they're much more likely to engage in a healthy lifestyle. And so these aspects are drivers of well-being, and therefore that gives the coach the opportunity to play in the good stuff. What makes you thrive, what makes you feel good about your life, what brings you positive emotions, because that's all going to ultimately help people want to value their lives more and engaged in the things that will help them stay healthy because they want to live the life that they have. Then the flourishing scale that goes back to Corey Keyes, 2009, and it's been revitalized here in the health care literature. Won't go through all of this, but self-acceptance, positive relationships, challenges of growth. So all these things are, core to well-being and core to coaching conversations and well worth investigating. And then in Scott Barry Kaufman's work, which I referred to in terms of revitalizing the self-actualizing work of Maslow, his frame of transcendence and sources of well-being is listed here. Again, he's drawing a lot on flourishing, self-determination theory, positive psychology, has created his own well-being menu, including transcendent experiences, which I was sharing earlier. So then we know from positive psychology, a major piece of work, a book this 3 inches thick, on the values and action, the character strengths and virtues that Marty Seligman and Chris Peterson. Chris Peterson, unfortunately, is also deceased. I remember him well in the early days that I was attending all the positive psychology conferences, and this is standing the test of time. It is science-based and evidence-based. These core strengths are rooted in history, in science, in religion. They tie into my multiplicity of mind model. I've mapped that. If you're interested, I can share that with you. And is an excellent model for us in well-being because of the evidence base. And just a quick coaching tool. If someone has a challenge, you have them look at this list. They say, pick one of these strengths, and then let's talk about how you can use that to overcome this challenge. And it's amazing how quickly people will have ideas that will pop, and they'll have some kind of cool new approach to overcoming a challenge. I want to just speak to some of the latest science around the role of sense of purpose and biology. So this is a research study that showed through autopsies of a large group of people whose cognitive function had been tested while they were alive. And they found that people who had a lot of plaques and tangles in their brains, signs of dementia or Alzheimer's, had good cognitive performance when they had a strong sense of life purpose. So their brains looked diseased like someone who had dementia, but they were functioning at a high level. And the distinguishing factor was that they had scored well in high sense of life purpose. So when you have a real reason to live and contribute to the world, it doesn't have to be something big. It can just be raising your children and helping, your neighbor deal with a crisis. That having a purpose keeps your brain working through even the disease and keeping you above water cognitively. So this stuff matters. Then the positivity. So the positive resources are the resources that give us the psychological capital that allow us to go and explore. That's the stability part. We have to have enough resources before we'll go. So we can help people, asking them, what gives you joy? What are you grateful for? When are you at your most calm? What interests you? What makes you hopeful? Where do you get your laughs? What's awesome in your life? How does love show up? All of these are great coaching questions. There's endless coaching questions when it comes to applying positive psychology. And they matter from Fredrickson's, this is a very important study about the connections among life satisfaction, positivity, and resilience. And basically what their mathematical algorithms showed is that positive emotions are the main variable that drives resilience, and resilience is the main variable that determines life satisfaction. So that means we have to have adequate positive emotions in order to deal with adversity, to feel good about our lives. That's a very cool sequence of events, because you might have thought, well, maybe you have lots of life satisfaction because you feel good, but in fact, or that when you're resilient, you're more positive, right? You never, like, how does this all connect together? And so this shows that it's the positivity that allows you to sparkle, that awakens your motivation to change, that allows you to deal with the setbacks when you're changing and step up and explore, get to the next level of existence. So positivity is the foundation that enables us to be autonomous, find our motivation, and explore and change. So we have to have this foundation of positivity. And another way to look at this is the world of psychological capital, where the Luthans and others have identified some positive constructs that are evidence-based, can be measured, and have interventions to improve them. And right now there are 4 that meet that test, which is hope, optimism, efficacy, and resilience. And that makes up the acronym HERO. And so when you have adequate levels of hope, efficacy, and all of these are science-based constructs, you are more engaged in health and positive life-giving behaviors, better attitude, more performance, and more well-being. So just another dimension of positive psychology that is, different from positive emotion, different from life satisfaction, but also important. And coaching conversations generate these things. At the end of a good coaching session, your client has more hope, more confidence, more resilience, and more optimism. Whether you worked on those things or you didn't, those things all increase a little after an energizing coaching conversation. So positive psychology was founded by Marty Seligman, who, my apologies, who in his early days wrote the book Authentic Happiness, which focused on meaning, pleasure, which is positive emotions, and engagement in life, which is flow, using your strengths in activities that are for a higher good. And that expanded later in his book Flourish to positive emotions, engagement in life, again, flow, autonomy, strengths, actually intrinsic motivation, different from other kinds of autonomous motion, where you are intrinsically enjoying and engaged in something that gives you pleasure now. So it's not future oriented, it's not identity oriented, it's just the being in flow every day, positive relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. So that makes up PERMA. So that's another, and that, I think, accomplishment is very alive. So in my a multiplicity model, that's the extroverted thinker, it's the achiever, it's the standards by which we measure ourselves in our professional lives, our status, our accomplishments. Not every culture is driven by this, but certainly in our Western culture, accomplishing things contributes greatly to our self-esteem and our life satisfaction. So it stands out in Seligman's model. Okay, so then let's talk about work well-being, because this has really come alive in the pandemic, because now we've realized that our work, the scientists were already there, but we realized that work drives well-being. Well-being also drives peak performance at work, but it's through our work we get many of the main things that make us thrive. And I don't mean just work like professional paid work, volunteer work, the work of raising a family, all of the stuff that is the discipline of getting up every day and setting your compass and moving towards some productive outcome. And, sadly, around the world, well-being at work is terrible, and to some extent, it's led to this great resignation where everybody's recalibrating and saying, like, what is my work life? What do I want? What's important here? And, by many measures, and this varies across industries, of course, but, only a third of us or so are really motivated, using our strengths and like our work. It's just a job. It's just, an income. We work to live. And this is a terrible, terrible waste of human potential, that we have not built a world where work and well-being are inextricably part of our agenda. And so thanks to a group of scientists starting at University of Michigan 20 years ago, the science of job crafting has come alive. And look at this, all familiar: autonomy, skills growth, competence, meaning and purpose, higher good, relationships, well-being. There you go. Those are the drivers that allow you to craft a job that helps you thrive. So you have control over designing your work. You can bring more challenge and complexity. You're using your strengths and skills. You're continually improving them. You're thoughtful about how you're contributing to a better world. You think about your job as a whole rather than bits and pieces. Your relationships are meaningful and rich at work, and you really lean in, and you figure out ways so that work improves your well-being as well as being a source of well-being. That's all within the realm of coaching and health and well-being, right? It's same stuff. Again, psychological resources that drive our engagement in a healthy lifestyle. And then the scientists put together this great research handbook on work and well-being. I just wrote a blog on LinkedIn this past weekend on well-being and leadership being, basically well-being being the new leadership. And you can get to that article, and I've linked it to my multiplicity of mind model, but basically I've referenced this book, and there's a nice chapter in here about how leadership drives well-being. When you are well led, you have less stress, less burnout, and more engagement. Okay, so now that's really probably the most important stuff I want to share. The rest I think you'll be familiar with. Gallup's well-being elements: career, social, financial, physical, community, just another model. But what their research shows is that the biggest driver of well-being is our professional well-being, what we do with our strengths every day, how we move ourselves and the world forward. So again, if we're going to work in well-being, even though we're in the health space, our professional well-being is part of our mandate, because it has such an impact on emotional well-being and engagement in health-giving ways of life. Of these 5 well-being elements I mentioned, career is the biggest, but look here in their analysis of these domains, only 7% of the population are doing well in all of these. 2/3 of us are doing well in one, but there's a lot of room for upgrade here, a lot of room. You might remember Jim Lair and Tony Schwartz and their Making of a Corporate Athlete, and they had 4 domains: purpose, mental, emotional, physical. Their main point was at work, we overuse the mental and emotional, and we underuse purpose and physical well-being. So that's not a surprise. And then, wellness wheels, they're all over the place, right? We've all got our favorites. And I have to say, I'm not a lover of a wellness wheel, because I think it asserts an assumption that you have to have all of this, like this perfect sphere, but that's not really how life works. And I much prefer the do-it-yourself thriving pie chart, that, you give people a blank sheet of paper and say, okay, fill this in. What is it that makes you thrive, that relates to your own inherent formula, back to thriving, and your multiplicity and your own structure? Some of us need more adventure. Some of us need more meaning. Some of us need more relationships. Some of us need more autonomy than others, and what does that look like for you? And then how do you live by that so that you've got the psychological resources to continually grow, be curious, explore, which is our natural birthright. That's if you go to the first page of self-determination theory, we are organisms who want to explore our environments, master our environments, and grow competence. In fact, the only reason we need coaching to help people do this is because our lives are too much focused on serving others, and we've lost touch with what makes ourselves thrive, and then and to live by that. And that's where coaches really help people align with that. So the last piece, what about the negative? It's important, right? Negative emotions, negative experiences, especially as we come through so there's lots of negative emotions. We're all dealing with them all the time. We're not therapists, we're not healers, but we have tools, and you got to start with mindfulness. Coaching is mindfulness in action. We are helping people become meta aware, become less reactive, become observers of their internal worlds, and to suffer well, as the beautiful, precious Thich Nhat Hanh said, who just recently died as well. Self-awareness, self-regulation, self-transcendence. This is a mindfulness model that I refer to all the time. This is the coaching path. You become aware of what's happening. You regulate yourself to improve, and ultimately you transcend the negative. Liberated Mind is a beautiful book. Steve Hayes, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, Susan David's Emotional Agility. This is a really great model that coaches can use to lean in, experience our negativity, and then align with our core values to move forward. Looking at the negatives in our lives, the obstacles on our path, the setbacks as we move through the change process, is just learning opportunities. And that's the growth mindset, to be continually focused on, I'm growing and learning even when things are not easy, especially the trauma of a pandemic. And that integration of our emotions, that's the self-transcendence, is a core process of emotional well-being. And if you've seen my Declips technique, that is a sort of quick mind hack, in a few minutes, taking a struggling emotion and turning it into integration and strength and calm and wisdom and all those great things. So with that, that's my gallop through the topic of coaching and well-being, and how I think about it, and the wholeness of it, and all the things that we can play with, and to really empower all of us to think of ourselves as well-beings, think of ourselves and coaching as in itself an intervention for human well-being, without even talking about well-being, and then have this big repertoire and menu from all these amazing scientists that many we've lost in the last few years. I mean, these are my heroes. I'm sure they're your heroes too. And many more are still alive and producing great work for us. And we are their army, that their channel to get all this beautiful science out to the world. So that's my what I wanted to share today about coaching and well-being. 2 peas in a pod.
Oh, well, bless you, Margaret. That was a comprehensive tour, bringing in theories, constructs to inform our practice. So thank you very much. Thank you too for the little models the mnemonics that we can actually already in my head. I loved the flow from life purpose to positivity to resilience and to life satisfaction. What a lovely model to really carry with you and understand, to get really into the shoes of your clients or patients. I also loved the work that you're doing, actually linking leadership. Wellbeing is the new leadership. And I have read your blog, which you shared on LinkedIn the other day, and I recommend this to everybody. It's really interesting. And many of the references within that blog are also really well worth following up, to give you a picture of where it's all going. So people, would you like to put some questions up for Margaret to answer? Just wait for a moment. Okay, we have D Mystery. Thank you for the excellent visuals on these concepts and ideas. It will help me to deepen my coaching practice. You mentioned that some cultures don't focus on accomplishment. Could you elaborate on which cultures and what their focus might be?
Yes, thank you for that. I don't dare stray too far in cultures that I don't understand, but I think we all appreciate that that there's a really big difference between Western styles of achievement and capitalism and drive and Eastern cultures, which are more about the collective good and the greater good. And so that's one big contrast between West and East. And I think in a way in the globe, it kind of creates this balance, right? Because in the West, we are so driven. And, I'm a Canadian and I've lived in Europe and UK and lived in the United States. And, Europe's become more accomplishment oriented in my lifetime. When I moved to the UK in my 20s, I had 5 weeks of vacation. I haven't taken 5 weeks vacation since I was in my 20s. And we took every minute of it. It was life balance was a really big thing. And I think still in Europe, so in Europe, there's more valuing of balance and honoring of the past and history. And so that's a different culture. Think of Brazil, where the Brazilians love, so they're the extroverted sensors. They love to play, they love to party, they love to enjoy life. And so that's their kind of personality. I think of Israel as a place of self-determination. That for me speaks to the autonomy and the drive. I think that culture is very much about self-determination. So yeah, I think, I dare not go too far. But that's, I think if you, whatever cultures well, you can think about what drives them, what's the core shared value, and you'll find that there's some element of the whole of human personality that is expressed more in that culture than others.
Thank you, Margaret. A quick question about Margaret's LinkedIn address. It's in the speaker bio. So if you go to the speaker program, and you go to Margaret's bio, it's listed in there for you to access. Right, Judith Roberts has said, where can I find out more about moving from serving my clients' needs to serving my clients? Sorry, serving my clients' core needs to serving my clients.
Yeah. Serving so that is actually just inherent in coach training. When you're learning to coach, you're learning to shut down your own inner dialogue and be fully present with the other and to be partnered almost in their minds together. We kind of disappear in our coaching sessions and we live and partner with the other person's experience, and just learning how to do that is really what I'm talking about. So it's really it's the underpinning of what happens when we become coaches, is we really shift from the need to express our own and share our own stuff to truly tuning into what the other needs in any given moment. And so, yeah, it's fundamental.
Yeah.
There's no one thing, but if a good coach training program should get you through that transformation process. That's really what that's what you want to become, right? Once you become a coach.
Thank you, Margaret. Victoria Haller says, a fantastic overview, and as Isabella says, a great set of resources to deepen our coaching practice. As a new coach, slightly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information out there, what would be the one book that you would read or course you've attended that fundamentally shifted your coaching practice?
Well, Victoria, when I started, there wasn't resources for science-based coaching in 2000. The British Psychological Society just started coaching psychology unit back then. Tony Grant was finishing his coaching psychology degree. So there was just a gang of us. And so we built it. And so the coaching psychology manual is the most robust out there in terms of a coaching protocol that integrates. It's not many coaching textbooks are a series of chapters written by different authors that take a particular coaching, a particular area of science and translate it into the coaching. But the manual is actually a full expression of a coaching protocol based on these theories. So we built one. That's really part of my story. And that's because it didn't exist when I started. After that, I have another slide I didn't show you with that's based on an image of a molecule and all the elements and all the different theories, and behind each one is a good book. And so if it's helpful, Isabella, I could do that follow up and just say, here are the books I would rely on. There's probably 15 to 20 or so that
Well,
you want to have. And the Well Coaches Advanced program has 15 books to read, and that's sort of our curation of what's most important. But yeah, there's definitely a core that you'll want to read.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. We need to close the session now because we need to move on. But there are a couple of questions here which we will get to you, Margaret.
Okay,
somebody has asked about resources and slides. So obviously these will be available in the recording. And yes, we will include the books list, Margaret, I'm sure. So everyone, thank you so much for coming to support us here, and thank you for Coach Meg and her wisdom. I've been longing to hear it, and I've been watching. There are lots and lots of videos on YouTube where Coach Meg shares every part of her mammoth knowledge and wisdom. Please do go and check those out. And we are now going to be heading straight into the next session. So could you all go back to the live event page and open up the session that you have chosen? And with that, thank you, Margaret. Thank you so much for your time and so much for your wisdom.
thank you all. Onward.